This week, the January 6th committee moves to prime time, holding a key hearing on Thursday with previously unseen material and witness testimony. That's what's being promised. It is undoubtedly important. But will it register with a mass audience? Over the last 10 months of the committee's investigation, we've already learned so much, thanks to scoop after scoop from CNN and other outlets. Yet, pro-Trump media has denied, deflected, defended, or just outright ignored the headlines. I mean, think about it. The coup plot was rooted in a big lie. And ever since then, new lies have surrounded it. Lies heard on shows like Tucker Carlson's on Fox and Greg Kelly's on Newsmax. It's so important to understand the divide in the media when it comes to January 6th. Two different extremes. I mean, look at MSNBC's coverage. January 6th mentioned more than 800 times so far on MSNBC this year, and fewer than 150 times on Newsmax. And many of those mentions on Newsmax are dismissing the attack. This is critical to understand, that it's so normal now on the right to deny, to deflect, or, in the words of Carlson, to say the committee is wholly illegitimate.
A wholly illegitimate committee.
January 6th is a phony beltway issue.
Just an echo chamber, a lefty echo chamber.
January 6th, what a lot of crap. What a lot of crap.
That is his message, and listen to the cheers. The Trump base does not want to hear about the coup attempt. The Trump base does not want to hear about the violence and about who inspired it and incited it. They don't want to hear the revelations at the hearing this week. And I'm not trying to claim that this doesn't matter, that the hearing doesn't matter. I'm saying it's important, and because it is important, it's being rejected by the MAGA media. I mean, will Fox even show the hearing on Thursday? I asked a spokesperson for Fox News. I have not heard back. But it's hard to imagine Tucker Carlson at 8 p.m. Eastern, who calls the committee illegitimate, Tucker Patriot Purge Carlson, giving up his time slot to hear the truth about January 6th. We'll see what Fox does. We will see what Newsmax does. But as Vanity Fair pointed out, the question for the media this week is whether the hearing will break through. Back with us, Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward. Bernstein's the author of Chasing History, and Woodward, the author, most recently co-author of Peril. Thank you both for continuing the conversation with us. Carl, you hear how skeptical I am that the media environment, this broken information environment, is actually going to allow for common ground this week on the 1-6 hearings. Am I too skeptical about what's going to happen?
No, you're not too skeptical, but I think we need to look at a bigger picture, and that is we're not just talking about Fox. We're not just talking about news media. This is about the culture of the United States, the people of the United States. And as journalists, one of the things we don't do enough is go out and find what's on the minds of the people of this country. Yes, the people of this country, many of them are affected and watch Fox, and they're influenced by, and the divide in our politics very much represented by the fact that Fox is a huge political and media force in this country. But we also need to look at what this January 6th hearing and the event is about.
Does it matter if, let's say, 7 out of 10 Americans know the truth and 3 out of 10 are in denial?
I think what matters first is that it become clear what happened on January 6th, and the committee has got that information. It's devastating. Look, there is only one law in the United States that goes to elect the President of the United States, and that is that on January 6th at 1 p.m., there will be a count of the electors from the election in November. That's the only moment, 1 p.m., when the President of the United States can be elected. What happened on January 6th? The President of the United States, his lawyers, his aides tried to keep that election from happening, staged a coup so that Joe Biden could not become the duly elected and installed President of the United States, tried to keep the Vice President out of being in the chamber, chased him down the stairs so that the Vice President could not preside over that 1 p.m. event. Mobs broke into the Capitol so that 1 p.m. counting could not take place. I think there's a misunderstanding about the enormity and the actual timeline of what happened. So the people you're talking about, whether they're on right, left, or center, they need to understand what happened at 1 o'clock and why the president Trump did not until 5 o'clock or whatever the exact time, 4:30, 5 o'clock that afternoon, by which time he could see that the coup had failed, that the votes were counted.
Right.
But he had attempted to not give up his office and stay in power, and Biden not become the president of the United States. Astonishing.
I wrote that banner. We should take it down because it's obviously Trump fans are not going to watch the hearings, right? They're not going to watch the hearings. But I take your point, Carl. It's very important. There's a MAGA base that's going to deny all of this and say just a few bad guys got out of hand. But then there's actually a lot of Americans who just aren't as attuned to the news as we are, Bob, who may want to tune in and learn new things for the first time. Let me just show this graphic before I go to you, Bob. This is a graphic showing Nielsen measurements of people watching TV during the day. The reason it's called prime time is because viewership peaks. The number of people available at home watching TV peaks in the evening. You can see that peak right there at 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern. So it is possible, Bob, tell me if I'm wrong, that there is a more casual news consumer who doesn't know all the details that we know about 1/6 that may learn them for the first time this week. Is that fair?
Well, the details are important, and it clearly shows. Carl and I, in our endless discussions, agree on really one point. There is an abundance of overwhelming evidence that this was a criminal conspiracy to subvert a lawful function of government. And it's in the law. It just says that is a crime. But I also think there's a strain here and that is that everyone needs to go down this painful road of introspection. We talked about the press. We need to think about how we do our job. I remember being in the Oval Office interviewing Trump before the 2020 election, and we're talking about what happened. How did he win in 2016? I think that's something historians are going to be working on for decades, if not even more. And so we're talking about this, and I tried to summarize what some of the historians were saying about 2016, and that the old order was dying in the Republican Party. There's no question about it. But the old order in the Democratic Party was dying. And I said this to Trump, and he just jumped in his chair at the Resolute desk. And I said, "You seized history's clock," pointing to that grandfather clock in the Oval Office. And he was, yes, and I'll do it again. Of course, he did not do it again, but it was only by 47,000 votes. But the idea that we're going to do things and say things to widen the partisan divide, I don't think serves the interest of the country or, quite frankly, of journalism. I think we need to say this is what we know, this is what we don't know. Be very, very careful and be as unemotional, frankly. It's difficult, but be as unemotional as possible here. And one of the lessons of Watergate, if I may, is that the aides to Nixon turned on him. H.R. Haldeman wrote finally in his memoir, said the dark shadow of Nixon runs through all of the crimes of Watergate. That's exactly what we're finding, and I think we'll find more this week, and I think it's going to go on for a long time, that the tentacles of the Trump presidency and the subversion of basic democracy is great, and I think people will look at that if we can kind of take the strident tone out as much as possible.
Let me add one really important thing without a strident tone, and that is about the huge difference between Watergate and what is happening today. And that is that it was courageous Republicans who said about Richard Nixon, "You cannot be the president of the United States anymore because you are a criminal and you have violated the law." So when we wrote, Bob and I, the final days about Nixon's last months and year in office, Among other things, we went to see Barry Goldwater, the great conservatives, the nominee of his party in 1964, to ask what had happened that he saw at the end. And he pulled out his diary, poured himself a big whiskey, pulled out his diary and began reading, and told us how he and the Republican leadership of the House and Senate had marched to the White House, confronted Richard Nixon across the desk. And Nixon said, Barry, in terms of conviction or acquittal in the Senate for after impeachment, would I prevail or not? Goldwater looked at the president and said, no, Mr. President, you have only a few votes and you will not have mine. You will not be acquitted. You will be convicted. That's the difference. The Senate Watergate Committee was constituted by a 77-0 vote, Republicans and Democrats. We now have a Republican Party that has said, we won't participate in the January 6th hearings. It is a partisan sham. It's not true.
They do what Tucker tells them. Bob and Carl, thank you very much for your time today. I'm honored to have you both here.
Thank you.